Welcome everyone to Melfuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Severance Season 2 Episode 3. It's called Who is Alive? So spoilers for the episode as always. Holy shit, this episode went places at the end. I almost for the first half of the episode, I thought there was some really cool things that I liked, some little character beats. Didn't love everything, right? I'll be honest, I could take or leave the weird people in the goat place, right? Not my favorite thing. But the back half of this episode, oh baby, we got to some juicy development. The cliffhanger to this episode felt like the cliffhanger that could have been the end of a season cliffhanger before the final season. That's what the end of this episode felt like in a lot of ways. And to be fair, I don't expect this show to get a lot of seasons. I think maybe 3 could be the last one, maybe 4 at a push. And the way we're going through, and we're not milking and elongating everything we possibly can, kind of suggests that as well. And mainly because they probably know that it took so goddamn long to make season 2 that they'd be silly to be planning for a 7-8 season run. Anyway, yeah, a lot of interesting things to talk about. It kind of neatly splits into the different characters for the most part until we get the outside stuff. And I think the outside stuff was definitely the more interesting of the two to me this episode. With the exception to that maybe being Dylan, who's his plot kind of bleeds through both. And I guess we'll start there. So Dylan gets his visit from his wife, right? The meeting room, which is where the security room used to be, which does even feel a little bit kind of intentional. Hey, this is where you broke the rules, Dylan. This is where you're going to get your meeting with your wife. Now, all throughout this scene, I was genuinely wondering, how do we know this is really his wife? Because I don't think we've seen her before. We heard her on the phone last episode, but we'd never seen her, I don't think. However, and I could be wrong, maybe I'm misremembering, maybe we saw her briefly in season 1 or something. But the episode answers my question though, because we see her in the outside world with them at their place, and and I love that they did, because instead of being that is it really her kind of vibe, we got some really interesting character things to think about, and it kind of feeds into the same things we've been talking about with Mark and with Helly to an extent. And I kind of love that Dylan kind of represents a more mundane version of that story. Because with Mark, it's this big dramatic thing where his wife died and he's going through all this stuff, and he severed to try and get away from it. Helly did it for whatever reason as a proof of concept to prove that Severance works. But the difference between Helly and Helena is revealing a lot about what she doesn't have in the outside world, the connection she doesn't have, how cold her world is in the outside, and who she could be without all that stuff. Dylan's a bit more mundane, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean in a good way, that we get to examine a character who, as his wife puts it, when she meets any Dylan and he's asking about himself, she mentions that he's not been able to keep a job. He's not been very good at that. And Dylan's like, wait, am I dumb? Am I an asshole? I'm just a screw up? He starts asking these questions, and she says he just never found his thing. So she clearly still very much likes her husband, although I do wonder if this completely stripped down version of the any version of her husband, who is kind of shocked to hear that he's maybe not the most amazing person on the outside, but not in a super, again, dramatic way where he, part of me was almost worried when we cut to his house later that we were going to see, he's a complete dick. He's a complete asshole husband who doesn't help with anything. And he doesn't actually seem to be a dick. He's not done the cookies yet, I think he said. But he's like, yeah, I'll do that. I think it just shows a life where both of them are working. She's working nights, which means because of his severance, he's barely seeing his wife, because they're only seeing each other when they're transitioning between the two shifts. And they're struggling to make ends meet, and their life just isn't it isn't exciting, it isn't fancy, it's just normal, and he's doing fine, right, maybe, but he's not living up to something. And I think it's very interesting to maybe examine how his wife is going to feel about the inside version versus the outside version, even though it's not a fair comparison in the small ways that she's going to notice the differences, because the inside version of Dylan isn't burdened with all these other things, like looking after the kids. It's just a new exciting thing to him. And yeah, there's some fun to be had as well when he's like he thinks that they live in a cattle ranch because the photo she shows him is like them with cowboy hats on and stuff. And she just kind of smiles at that, and that was funny. That was a funny thing. And that's sort of confirming to her just how little he knows about his outside world. Now, on that subject, right before we get to that part, she mentions someone called Phil, and immediately, Miss Hung, the kid, chimes in and says, "Do not talk about any sensitive information." But she doesn't stop her from telling him the name of the kids, because at first I thought, is Phil a kid? It didn't sound like Phil was a kid, but like maybe Phil's one of their kids. Is Phil, who is Phil? Like to the point where they would not let her tell him about Phil, because they clearly decided it was okay for him to know his kids' names, which actually also leads to the other thing about this whole charade, is that how much of a manipulation tactic this is. This felt like the entire thing was designed to guilt any Dylan into being a good employee for Lumen, into not breaking the rules again, into possibly ratting out his friends at some point later, because now he's got a meeting with the wife who says she's proud of him, and he even says, "I won't screw up, I'll do good, like I'll make you proud." Like he's even, and I'm not saying the wife has agreed to manipulate him. I think Lumen has put her in a position where just naturally the things that she is saying and talking about are manipulating him, right? Not that she's manipulating him, but that she's been used by Lumen to manipulate him. And it's, like, so now he's like this lapdog who gets to dream of this wife and kids that he never really will get to meet, probably. The barring some reintegration, which we'll talk about later. And it keeps him dreaming of this carrot on this, instead of the stick. He now feels it's almost like he's now burdened with the shame that he now assumes that the outside version of him has. Does the outside version have that shame? Hard to say. It was very interesting because obviously Outie Dylan asks her about it and says, "Hey, what was the thing like with me?" And she says, "Oh, it was good. It was weird, but it was good." And I do wonder if maybe part of what we'll get from this, if we get more of it, is just the idea that, like, I don't know, it feels weird to say a rekindling of their romance, because she gets to, because it's not like, I think the Dylans are completely different people. They don't have, their circumstances are not wildly different, where, it's not like Helly and Helena, where it's like, oh shit, she comes from a completely different world. Yeah, okay, any Dylan obviously doesn't know where he lives or who his kids are or what, but it's not like he's suddenly this like alien being. Like it's all pretty understandable stuff. So I wonder if, much in the same way I talked about Mark's sister Devon kind of sympathizing with the innie version of Mark, I wonder if Dylan's wife kind of recognizes a more like innocent version that's not burdened with everything. It's a really interesting dynamic to watch play out, and I think Dylan as a character gives us the more normal type person, and how them just not being a part of their family life and how that changes them one way or the other, and how to one, the promise of a family that's out there is this exciting thing that motivates them, but the one at home is kind of tired by it, right? He's not an asshole. He's just like, yeah, this is another night where I'm looking after 3 kids and I have to bake some cookies that I don't want to bake. I think it's just interesting to have this character who's less fantastical than some of the others, I guess. Fantastical is not the right word. Just dramatic, I suppose, would be better. But I think it has a place there to explore that stuff. So that was Dylan. And the stuff that, and again, all in the mystery of Phil and who Phil is. Is Phil someone who works for Lumen that talked to his wife? Is Phil a friend? Is Phil, and if it is a friend, why would Lumen say, no, don't talk about Phil? Who's Phil? Alright. Irving, I'll mention, because he goes off to try and, because Mark gives out flyers to say, hey, let's ask if they've seen Gemma. which, you know, obviously not say they're saying Miss whatever alias was, or whatever the therapist's name was. But he's the one that goes to R&D, or whatever Bert's department was called. And he ends up just kind of reminiscing about Bert with the lady who works there, who's in charge of that place now. And it's a sweet scene. It's nice seeing them talk about Bart and like him showing his drawings of Bart. She's really pleased by, and it's all very nice, and just to see Irving be kind of happy again because he's reminiscing with someone who cares about him. But the curious part is right at the end when she sees the drawing of the painting that he saw that his outer version did, and she immediately like names it. She says, "Oh, what? How do you know about that hallway? I think it was the exports hallway. I think she called it." And that's interesting because it's like, okay, why is that something that outie Irving is drawing? It really does. Outside Irving is kind of a mystery to us right now. You know, we're not cutting to him other than just, you know, we saw him at the door with Milchick, we saw him do the painting, but he's painting something that's inside the Lumen building, which is immediately kind of, you know, raising questions to me. So it does suggest to me that Irving on the outside he's got some story there that we're not ready to reveal yet, but it's probably something where he's actually investigating Lumen, or maybe, I don't know, or maybe it's just it'll be something we find out where he's having like dreams of Lumen because he's been there long enough or something, and it's part of the Severance, like the thing, not breaking down, but like this is like an after effect or a side effect of it or something. Curious for sure. Mark and Helly going to the goat place was my least favorite part of the episode. I just, in some ways, it just feels like weird for the sake of weird. But yeah, I mean, Gwendolyn Christie says, "Hey, we won't impede your search." I don't really have too much to say about it. Obviously, there's the creepy horror movie moment where the guy in the goat like headdress stands up. So I mean, that's a moment that people might enjoy. Yeah, I think I'll save Mark and Helly properly though for when I talk about their outside stuff. Milchick I want to mention briefly here because Milchick has like a very strange scene that reintroduces Natalie, who's the woman who talks on behalf of the board. She's got the earpiece in and she speaks. Now I don't remember well enough from season 1 if this was something she did, but there's a couple of moments in this scene in particular where it almost felt like either she was like hearing something really bad and she was it was like a struggle to keep the fake smile going, and she looked like she was about to break down in tears, but then she kept talking normal and said whatever the next thing was. Or maybe like whatever they've done to give her this personality is like breaking down and the real her was like seeping through for a second. I don't know, there's just a couple of moments. It's right before she's giving him the gift. She has this moment where she just sort of looks horrified for a second and then goes back to the super fake smile and everything's all right. And she's out fake smelling Milchick because that was his whole thing in season 1, is that he was constantly doing the corporate fake smile thing. And this in concept is such a weird scene. Again, manipulation tactics going through the roof in this one. Because they've gifted him a series of paintings that I think the word they use was recanonize the history of the company or the family, where like now their founder looks like Milchick, like, you know, it's like a black man with a mustache, and he's, you know, I obviously he says he's grateful. They expect him to say that. Natalie says she got something similar and she was grateful. It did a lot for her. But you can tell he is horrified. I was a little bit horrified. This is like mind screwing like stuff here. Like what is this? Here, this is our founder, but now it looks like you for some reason. It's such a weird thing. I'm curious. When we see that he doesn't take it home, he hides it in like a supply closet or something. He puts it up on top of some boxes. He doesn't want to take that shit home, and I don't blame him. So yeah, Milchick's having a weird go of it, and well, I mean, we'll see where that goes. But I had to mention that scene, and the performances of both actors in that scene is very fascinating to watch because neither one of them are being genuine. Natalie is clearly kind of hiding any real feelings 99% of the time. Milchick, well, he's not doing the fake smile here. He's trying to be stoic and he's still lying and still saying the answers they expect him to give. Just really, really interesting to watch a scene like this where neither character is being forthright, but you can sort of read a lot from their mannerisms, how they respond, how long they take to respond. It's really good stuff. Which actually leads to Natalie going to see Dylan's husband. Or sorry, Devin's husband, not Dylan. The show got really different there for a second. Yeah, Devin finds Natalie speaking. Apparently, they want him to rewrite his book slightly or tweak it to certain language that will really speak to the innies, which is wild. Like the idea that he'll get roped into doing like some sort of weird self-help for innies kind of variation of his book. And Devin clearly does not know how to take this at all. Does not know how to take the weird, awkward flirting that's almost kind of happening between them. Not that I think Devin's husband is in any way actually flirting or trying to do that. I think he is just the type of awkward that is completely responding to this woman's smile and everything she's saying because she's been praising his book and all the rest of it. But really fascinating because I think it is when we get outside the company, outside the workday, that I was really starting to click with a lot of the things going on in this episode. This was fascinating in and of itself. Now, the thing that I didn't mention at the start of the episode, of course, is Mark. While we do spend most of the first half inside the Innies world, we do start with Mark like timing something. He's going to work and he's timing how long it takes for him to get from his car. He runs into the building and he's like counting and counting and counting once he takes his watch off until he switches to any Mark. And we find out that what he's doing with his sister later that night is that they're creating some kind of like some sort of attempt to flash a phrase into his eyeballs with a light so it'll linger after he's went through and become the innie so that he can pass on a message to the inside Mark. The question being, the title of the episode is Who is Alive? Pertinent, I would say. So he basically goes and tries to practice this in his car. He's just kind of like flashing this message at him. He's trying to see how long it lasts and how long he can remember it and still see it without help. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the lady who was working with Petey, the one who gave him the reintegration treatment, she's just there and she's staring at him. And he freaks out. She wants to be let in the car. He finally lets her in. It takes a bit of convincing, though. He's not really game for it at first. And when she says, or she's asking questions about what happened with the overtime thing, right? The protocol, and that his sister talked to him, yada yada. And out of nowhere, she just says something to the effect of, did he say your wife was alive in there? Without him saying anything to prompt it. He doesn't say anything that would imply that he's trying to ask that question or anything like that. Maybe she's seen what's on the light, perhaps, and that kind of prompts her to say it, but she just says it. She clearly knows more than like anyone he's spoken to. Like she knows something, and he very seriously says, "Is she?" And there's a long pause. She takes her a while to answer, and she eventually says she was the last time I saw her, which is a very good response for just a TV perspective, because it does leave the question open that she might not be now. Like, we know she was alive, and we, the audience, too, know she was alive, but she doesn't confirm that she's definitely alive now, because we don't know that. We don't know what they've done. Which, on that subject, a commenter on episode 1 said, what if the kid is actually like a younger version of his wife? And at the time I kind of was like, maybe, I don't know. Given that we're talking about clones and we're doing all this stuff with goats and we're talking about bringing someone back from the dead, the idea that they had to grow a new Gemma isn't that absurd anymore. Like, I'm not saying she definitely is, but it's possible. Like, it doesn't seem like out of the realm of possibility given everything else we're doing right now. So that's something. My favorite thing about this sequence, though, because her showing back up again did feel quite out of the blue and like, whoa, okay, she's back. Arguably, she's back because she heard about the overtime thing, and that's like a good reason to like pursue Mark again. But when he gets out of the car and he's kind of hyperventilating, he's taken in, because hear someone say that his wife in some form has still been alive since he thought she died is a lot of news to take in. He's breaking down, and the woman's like, hey, look, this light thing doesn't work. They just, they dilate your pupils. It's not, you're not going to get a message through. And even if you did, how would he get a message back out? Which is something I actually had thought of earlier on when they started talking about their plan. I was like, wait, but how is he going to say back? Like, what? Like, how is any Mark going to somehow get that information back out? And she says, hey, the only way to do it, it's easier, is reintegration, and I'm better at it now. And she starts like making her case and pitching to Mark why he should consider doing this, and he just says, "I'll do it. I'm in." Like, which I love. I love that the second he hears that he might be able to see his dead wife again, it's not a question. It's not something he has to weigh up or down. It's just, no, I'm going to do it. So let's get what I wasn't expecting was for us to cut straight to basically them doing it. Like, I thought, oh, we're going to spend an episode of her prepping or something, and maybe it'll take some time, and it's not going to be like an instant thing. But sure enough, we get the sequence of him getting ready and going into his basement where she set up a bunch of various things, got some sensors on his head, and they did a really good job here, actually, from like a filmmaking perspective, of giving us a nice simple thing to visualize what's happening, and that is simply the radio waves. Like, there's two waves, they have to be in sync, and they're not, and we can see two separate lines, and we're trying to get them to sync up, and that's where the two personalities will be as one. And it's just such a simple visual language that we can understand. As we see them get closer, it tells us exactly that we're getting there and there. I think what's really interesting to me is when she's asking questions to try and provoke certain like answers out of him. And she's asking things. Oh, okay, what's your name? Where were you born? What's your mother's name? And she asks, actually, what's your mother's eye color at one point, and he's like, and she's like, seriously? And I'll be honest, I don't think I know my mother's eye color. To be fair, I like, okay, slight tangent of a rant here. This is something that always comes up, particularly between romantic couples, about, do you know your partner's eye color? And it's seen as like an offense if you don't. I never, ever notice someone's eye color. I could not tell you the eye color of anyone on this planet. I really couldn't. It's just not something I notice. I just don't. So I felt personally attacked by that reaction. Anyway, so what's interesting to me, though, is that when she starts saying, hey, what's something you feel shame over? And he starts talking about how he felt guilty about letting his dog die when he was a kid. And that's when, like, it seems like the switch starts to happen. And I think that's interesting just because of, like, okay, the fact that they literally are using shame as, like, a trigger for the mind when they're doing this at Lumen is very fascinating in terms of just how much of the manipulate. Because we talk about manipulation a lot this episode, and this felt like even on this level they're manipulating the brain. I mean, hell, that's exactly what they're doing. They're manipulating the brain. That's the whole Severance thing in the first place. So anyway, this does a great thing where she's asking, what is your first memory? And he's trying to think, and then it starts to flicker, and we see what his new first memory is, right? Because we know what his new first memory is. Like, any first memory will be waking up just like Helly did in the first episode of the show. And the episode ends with him sitting up, and it's kind of flickering between the clothes that he was wearing and the suit that he wears for work, and it's kind of, it's showing you that he's flickering between. And if I was to make a guess about the next episode, I could be wrong, but I feel that the next episode might be like any Mark's like first like day work. It just feels that that's where we might go from here, and the idea is that we're following any Mark's first day, and it's relevant because Outie Mark is remembering it for the first time. That would be my guess. Maybe they'll do like time skips and we'll get more than just the first day, but I suspect that this ending's kind of tease it up for like, no, we're going to have like some of his early stuff that we didn't see from the perspective of Outie Mark remembering it. And then obviously they can just sort of shorthand and say he remembers other things that we already saw because we already know them. This was a great ending. This is an exciting ending that completely shakes up the show, and I think back, in episode 1, I remember there'd been like a slight worry that maybe we're going a little bit status quo again by having the team back and having Lumen pretend that everything's just kind of fixed and just get back to work, and like, are we going to go back to them sneaking around and just asking the same questions again? And I feel like everything in episode 2 and 3 has distinctly said, no, we're not doing that. We're advancing things. We're doing interesting things. If you'd asked me last season when will Mark reintegrate and like have something like this happen, I would have guessed maybe the start of the final season, maybe not even until the last episode. So the fact that we've done it now, and there's ramifications for this which I really like. So obviously it completely changes the dynamic of Mark as a character, how he's going to be inside work talking to the others. Does he tell them? Does he not? Talking to his sister, like there's a lot of fascinating conversations that I'm kind of excited about now once he's kind of started to settle into this, which may take a while. He might be kind of, flipping back and forth and being confused and whatnot, because it's not like it went well for Petey, if we recall correctly from season 1. But what the other thing I was thinking of though is the idea of how Helly or Helena might react to this, because there's a moment in this episode when they're walking to the goat place where he double checks and says, hey, are you okay with helping me try to find her? And she says, yeah, sure. And they have this awkward moment, and it kind of felt like, assuming it's Helena pretending to be Helly, where it's like she's trying to create a moment where she wants the kiss to happen again, and she doesn't want to just do it herself. She wants to kind of hint and smile at Mark for him to like take the moment, right? And he doesn't do it. He kind of just ultimately kind of backs down and says, oh, we should get going again. Or he didn't even say it. I think he just sort of nods and let's keep moving. I think Helena is trying to feel some of those things that she witnessed Helly feel. And what's fascinating now, potentially if Mark is reintegrated, especially if it's like a permanent, this is just fully it now, he's advanced to that point, how does his feelings for Helly intermingle with his feelings of the outie of remembering his dead wife? That obviously is number 1 on the table. But the other question that brings to mind for me is, how does Helly or Helena react to this? So Helena, if she finds out, at some point she definitely will, but like depending on when she finds out, is she going to feel like the person that she was like drawn to come in here and meet when she watched that footage, is she going to feel some sense of loss or betrayal because he's not really there anymore? He's kind of become someone new. That's kind of interesting to me. It's also interesting to me that if we do get real Helly back, again, assuming that we don't have real Helly right now, which I'm feeling pretty positive on right at the moment, then how does Helly feel when she finds out that he's been reintegrated and like it's not exactly the Mark she knew anymore? And does that impact like our excitement of getting the real Helly back? Because one of the big reasons why it was exciting to like, oh, we're going to build up to getting the real Helly back, when for some reason maybe Helena decides she wants to switch and like give the other one a chance, it was basically the chemistry between her and Mark, the idea of them reuniting. That was the carrot dangling in front of the audience, being like, oh, we'll eventually get Helly and Mark back together. But all of a sudden, that feels like it's blown up in her face because he's not just that Mark anymore. And even if he does meet her again, it's going to be clouded by the fact that there's still the dead wife or the not so dead wife. And of course, that before we even start getting into, is it really his dead wife? Is it a clone with her, some of her memories? Is it her corpse that's been kind of reanimated with just an innie? Like, these are the things that obviously murky all this up as well, but I think it's just kind of fascinating to think about how this changes the dynamic of anyone who cares about any mark or outie mark or whatever. If anything, the only like downside to this for me is I was so excited about the idea of Devin starting to sympathize more with any mark and caring about him, that I almost wish we'd kind of drawn out that a little bit longer, where we got maybe a bit more of her sticking up for any mark against outie mark and saying, hey, he deserves help, kind of thing. So, it's not a big loss because this is also an exciting direction to go in. But I did love that kind of potential there from the interactions we got last time. But no, it's super exciting. I'm sure there's numerous other questions I could be asking about what happens now. Does he tell the others? That's kind of a big question. And that's the other thing is, like, Milchick clearly is not in the happiest of places right now. Through the various scenes in this episode. And the other character we've not talked about yet is Cobel, and she's not particularly in the happiest place. She's leaving to begin with, but she turns around. And she ends up coming up and confronting Helena outside the company building. She says that if I have to come back, my demands have to be met. I have to be working at macro data refinement. I have to be floor manager. You have to get rid of Milchick. He's not up to the task. And Helena says, I think you're overestimating your contributions and underestimating your blessings. But she then says, she calls Natalie and says, hey, get the board ready for me. Me and Miss Cobel are going to talk to the board. And she starts walking Miss Cobel back. And this is a very, very interesting little moment where Miss Cobel, as she's approaching the front of the building where the limo is and the limo driver is, she sees the limo driver and immediately starts to, like, her alarm bells start going off. You can tell she gets really sort of spooked and scared that she's been led into, like, a trap of some kind. What she's worried they're going to do is an interesting idea as well. Like, is she worried about just being killed? Did the lemon just kill people? I mean, up until now, I mean, yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting. I can't remember if they just outright killed anyone last season, but maybe it's the worry is that, they'll just wipe her mind. They'll turn her into an innie and just never give her outie back. Like, maybe that's what she's worried about. But she does seem to get very scared when she feels like she's walking. It's a very that scene from Goodfellas where De Niro's telling the wife of Leota to go down the alleyway, and she kind of considers it and then realizes that it could be a trap and gets scared and goes away. It's kind of like that, where she's like, oh, wait a minute. She's just telling me what I want to hear to lure me in. And she shits it. She turns around, she backs away slowly, turns around, goes to her car, and skedaddles. So I think it's interesting that she is clearly wanting to finish this Cold Harbor project, and she seems to really care about it. But obviously now it doesn't seem like she can trust Lumen and is not against them, but clearly is not with them anymore. I will be fascinated to see. I mean, does she kind of flip in some way? Does Milchick possibly end up flipping? Because it's not like he seemed very happy with his treatment in this episode either. So it does seem like everyone is unhappy at Lumen. Everyone is miserable. Yeah, even Helena, even though she doesn't want to admit it to herself, but seeing her be so happy, it kind of illuminates how unhappy outie Helena is. So, yeah, all that stuff is super fascinating to me. This was ended up being a great episode. I think it took a little bit to find its footing. The goat, the weird people looking after the goats, I just kind of felt whatever towards that, but the Dylan meeting with the wife and, like, seeing the real version on the outside talking to his wife afterwards was a really great little 1-2 punch that just, again, fleshed out his character and the idea of what Severance does to people so much, and splitting those sides of him up. and then everything with Milchick I thought was super fascinating, and just teasing more of Lumen's manipulation. Because even though he's the one helping them manipulate the others, you know, he's the one that brought Dylan. I mean, he didn't bring Dylan to the room today, but he brought Dylan into the idea of the plans of this meeting room before. You know, he helps the company manipulate the innies, but then he's also been kind of manipulated. He's still been given a carrot. Like, he recognizes it, though. Like, Dylan, bless him, is not smart enough perhaps yet, or is too naive to not see that this meeting with the wife is a manipulation tactic, that it is a carrot in front of him. Whereas Milchick, I think, sees these paintings and knows, or at least feels, that they're doing something. Like, he's not blind to that this is some sort of attempt to just keep him appeased and keep him in line. And I think that's quite interesting to see. And I could definitely see a potential future where he flips and ends up wanting to help the innies. Maybe. I don't know. I think all the possibilities are kind of open at this point. So that was very good. It was very good. I mean, the ending was the thing. The ending's such an exciting cliffhanger for next time. And going back to the whole possibly cloning going on theories, is that there's a lot of stuff in that opening title sequence where it looks like babies with adult heads. I was going to say babies with human heads. All babies have human heads. That's kind of their thing. But there's like babies with adult heads, which kind of goes into this idea of cloning another person and, I don't know, have them be a replacement of some kind or what. All right. I mean, yeah, I don't know. So much to think about. I'm super excited to get to next week's episode. And this is the beauty of weekly TV, is they give you something like this, and then they say, you wait a week. You stew on that, you think about it, and you get excited. And that is, yeah, that's what we're doing. So let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments below. Any other thoughts and theories? Fun to hear them. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, and of course you can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and get bonuses, especially for the movie channel. MailFuzz Movies has all the movie podcasts. Go check out that. But that is me. So thank you very much. I will see you guys next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?